Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs, et bienvenue à la Comité des finances et de développement économique pour le 1er mai 2018. Welcome to Finance and Economic Development Committee for the 1st of May 2018. Declarations of interest, déclaration d'intérêt. Confirmation of minutes, adoption de procès-verbaux pour le 3 avril 2018 for the 3rd of April 2018. Carried. We have a presentation by our folks at the LRT office. Councillor El Shantiri, please. I think what we should do, Mr. Clerk, we're going to have this at every FEDCO, so can we move some motion that we don't have to do this all the time?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we'll just take care of that administratively.
Okay, so in essence, what Eli is moving now is that we have the LRT presentation at the beginning of every FEDCO meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Therefore, be it resolved that the Finance and Economic Development Committee waive Section 83.4 of Procedure Bylaw to receive a presentation from staff with respect to the configuration line and dispense with the requirement of staff to provide separate written report on this presentation.
In essence, for the next several FEDCO meetings till the end of this term of council. Agreed? Carried? Okay, thank you, Councillor El Shantiri. We'll come back to that. We'll do the consent agenda now. Office of the City Clerk and Solicitor, Bureau du Greffier Municipal et de l'Avocat Général, appointments to the Westboro Village Business Improvement Area Board of Management, nomination au Conseil de gestion de la zone d'amélioration commerciale du village de Westboro. That Council approve the appointments of Richard Brown, Steve Harding, and Molly Vandershee to the BIA. Carried? Corporate Services Department, Direction Générale des Services, Conservation Authorities, 2018 levies for les levies pour 2018. Carried? Procurement Year in Review, 2017, l'année de 2017. Received. Excuse me. Item number 5, we have a presentation, operating and capital budget, and we have some motions rather, so we'll come back to that. Planning, Infrastructure and Economic Development, Direction Générale de Planification de l'Infrastructure et de Développement économique, Brownfield Grant Program, 1960 Scott Street. Carried? Yes, we had, I apologize, there was one speaker that supported this that didn't want to speak if we agreed. So that was Kelly Rhoda Reiser. You're happy? Okay, thank you. Recreation, Culture and Facilities Services Department, Direction Générale des Loisirs, de la Culture et des Installations, donation for to the City for Community Benefit Policy. Councillor Brockington. Is a brief comment, Councillor? If you'd like to come to the microphone, we can deal with that now, and then it frees up staff to go back and carry on with some work. Okay, well, why don't we just hold that then? Okay, we'll come back. Item number 8, Municipal Capital Facilities Agreement, Community Museums, Diefenbunker Canada's Cold War Museum, accord relatif aux immobilisations municipales, musées communautaires pour le Diefenbunker. This is an extension. They do such great work out there. Congratulations. Okay, so maybe what we'll do is we'll just go...
Mr. Mayor, just on a point of order.
Yeah.
There's IPDs on the agenda. I wanted to ask to hold B, the economic impact, Hard Rock Casino.
Okay, we'll come back to that then.
I think you have to ask for 2/3 to agree to lift it.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Brockington, you had a question on the corporate donation policy, and Councillor Hubley as well. So the floor is yours, Councillor Brockington, and I believe Mr. Chenier will answer your question.
Thank you, Your Worship. I actually don't have any questions. I just wanted to provide a very brief comment on the draft policy. First of all, I'm very pleased to see this before FEDCO this morning. As committee members may be aware, as part of the midterm governance review, Council unanimously approved the direction to staff to bring forward a draft policy regarding donations to the city for community benefit. Certainly this is of great interest in my ward and I know across the city. And in particular, I'm very, very pleased to see components that talk about consultation and public engagement, how donations are to be managed, and the documentation and reporting requirements for these donations. So I think the draft policy before us is very thorough. Certainly my discussions with Mr. Chenier indicate that this is the most comprehensive policy with respect to donations in the province, and I'm very, very supportive to see this before us today. So that's all I wanted to comment, Your Worship.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you. Councillor Hubley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question for staff on this one is under the consultation piece. I noticed that the community consultation was only done with the Federation of Citizens Associations of Ottawa, which doesn't really represent groups. I think I have one group in my area that's involved, and other councillors are raising their hands too. They do not represent the associations of the city, although they've taken that name. And I would really like to see on a policy as important as this and others that are going to come up under your review, Mr. Chenier, that you involve as many associations as possible. And I think the best way for staff to be able to identify those groups would be through the ward councillors. You know, like I have some associations that have 4 or 5 members. I wouldn't ask you to do that piece. We could take care of that. But there's other associations that have hundreds of members that could provide, you know, I'll give you the example of the Bridlewood Community Association. They run the spring sports program and everything. They're very involved with your department, yet they're not listed here as part of the consultation. So I'd like to see the ward councillor and a wider group of community groups involved in the next consultation, if that's possible.
Absolutely, Councillor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great. Thank you on the report. Carried. Adopté. Next is Confederation Line update. Mr. Manconi and staff. Just to remind members of council, later this morning and to members of the press, they'll be sent a notice. We're going to have a very exciting event on Friday at 1:30. We're all elected officials from the 3 levels of government are going to be boarding the train and heading to the tunnel, and we're going to be conducting the last spike. The final piece of track has been laid on one of the directions, and that will take place on Friday at 1:30. Details on transportation arrangements will be sent to your offices and to the media later today. So, Mr. Manconi, lots of exciting news on the LRT front that we've seen. I was at Tunney's Pasture on the weekend for the MS walk, and I saw the train parked at Tunney's Pasture, which looked great, and congratulations on getting it through the tunnel, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to walk you through a number of activities today, and the presentation is a little bit different than what you've seen in the past. I'm building on what you have seen and giving you the updates and the things that we're really focusing on. So everything from construction all the way through to operator training that you see on the agenda there. I'd like to start off with just a short little video. This is of the train coming through the tunnel heading in a westerly direction. And the significance of this was an actual testing protocol. It's called clearance testing, that you need to make sure the train goes through the tunnel and is unobstructed in every way. So it's significant in that sense. So I just want to make sure I can start this thing. Where's my technician?
So, Matt, if you could start the video, please.
No. Perfect. Just a brief video of the train coming through. And the significance of this is they're bringing the train into the westerly section of the system so that they can do track testing and system testing on the western portion. Once the tunnel is complete, then they can do end-to-end testing through Tunney's all the way through to Blair. The train is parked just near the Tunney station right now. They're doing some final work, and then they should start testing and commissioning on the westerly portion in the coming weeks. So the train has gone through. There's permanent power connected to all of the western stations. The elevators and the escalators are being installed throughout the network, and there has been good progress started on the wood ceiling at the eastern end of the system. Streetscaping on Queen Street is taking shape, and vehicle 33 of 34 is on the assembly line, so we're approaching that final vehicle. These pictures of the stations, I'll go through these briefly. You recall at the last update I was talking to you about how important the finishing work is, and this is an example of the glass railings, but also what I draw your attention to is how bright the stations are and airy feeling, and also a reminder that where you see wood, that's generally completed. It's protection systems that they have in place. I'm going to have to get Matt back down here. Apologies. There we go. Sayreville, more finishes. This is the signages, and behind those signages is all of the conduit that you see for the wiring and the systems, so it's a clean finish. Overhead on the platform, that's the platform lighting, and the fencing that you see there, that's required, and that's temporary. That's to separate the active rail operation from the construction zone, so that's a safety protocol. Saint Laurent, to the far right, you can see the ceramic panels on the walls. You can see the cameras being installed, and then again, there's that temporary fencing and the wood that's protecting the platform that is completed. Inside the guts of Saint Laurent, you start to see finishes, everything from the glass doors in the elevators to the ceiling and litter bins and the ceramic walls and finishes that are throughout the stations. Tremblay, glass partition on the far right-hand side. The stairs are completed. They're just waiting for the glass railings. And again, the composite material up on the ceiling is finished. And to the far right, in the corner where the glass is, you can see the wood composite that's also going up on the ceiling. Herdman Station, you recall the last update, wasn't a lot of glass on the outside. They're actively putting up those glass panels throughout. And again, that shields the customers from wind and the elements, but also provides that natural light and the openness feeling. Lee's Station, this is a good shot in that, it highlights the architectural features that we have in terms of the stations, and you recall how I always talk about how you're naturally drawn to the opening of the station. There's no doubt where that front door, that location is, and that's important for the customer service. And this is inside of Lee's where there's some work that needs to be done, so you're seeing the panels going up and some of the conduit off on the right-hand side. Same with University of Ottawa. This is inside Rideau Station. It is your biggest station. There's some significant amount of work yet to be done there. The ceiling that you see, that's for the suspension of the finishes on the ceiling. There will be a big glass panel up on that concourse. The track is down on the one side, and of course we're almost finished the track throughout that section in Rideau. But again, on the clearance testing, that train drove through there. Those temporary bins were out of the way, but that's to ensure that they had perfect clearance throughout the tunnel. This, Mr. Mayor, members of the committee, is the longest automated stairwell in Canada for transit use. It's 181 steps, and it's about 120 feet in length, so it's the biggest one in Canada. That's at Rideau Station. That gets you to Rideau and Sussex. Parliament, this shot's important in that it shows you not just the station that's underground, but also the finishing work that's going on the street, everything from the interlock to the benches and the entrance on the side there, midpoint entrance. That's the steel frames. Inside Parliament Station, that's final ceramic flooring that's going in, so it's in fairly good shape right now. And same with Lion, that's the glass that houses the elevator. So whenever you see glass going up on elevators, that's usually the final touches. Pimisi, lots of work going on there, lots of activity, and it's completing a lot of the finishing work, both interior and exterior, as you can see on the panel wall and the glass that's going up. And the same with Bayview, lots of activity, major transfer point with the Trillium line. That's inside Tunney's Pasture, looking down, escalators on both sides, and lots of work being done on the platform and on the ceilings, the skylights are being ready to install to permit the natural light to enter into that facility. And that's that train that you saw that came through to the western portion, parked just before Tunney's pasture. Now, Mr. Mayor, I wanted to spend a few minutes today to talk about the systems. You heard me speak a lot about system testing and integration. There are a lot of systems, and on the eastern portion of the network, I'll show you pictures of most of these elements: the security cameras, the PA speakers in the stations, the passenger information display boards, the intrusion detection, the hardwired telephones for emergencies, fire safety systems, the radio system, and the SCADA. Those are all important from a safety perspective and from a customer experience perspective. So that is your passenger signage system being tested out at Blair. It talks about the next two trains. It lets the customers know when they're arriving, and it also gives them the time, the current active time. Cameras, you will see hundreds and hundreds of cameras throughout the system. That's for the customer security, for operations, for control into the integrated control center, and for managing all train movements, not just only for day-to-day activities, but also when we have full platforms during special events such as Canada Day and so forth. You're going to hear the term lantern. At every station there will be a panel of white finished glass with a big O on it, and it's distinctive. It defines the entrance into the station, but also our architect has been phenomenal in this, in that he's integrated the ticket vending machines into that. So it's a clear finish, and rather than just having a standalone unit, again, very, very unique and iconic in terms of defining our great system. Inside the stations, fire alarms to the far left, interior lighting, tactile warning tracks on the floor. So these are all the finishes that you do at the end as you're approaching the timeline that we are on. Elevators, again with glass finishes and all the trim and kits that need to go into them. And they're very bright and very open to ensure that there's clear visibility into those elevators for our customers. Lots of exterior lighting. I believe this is Blair. They're doing the finishing touches on some of the lighting. Push buttons for accessibility features. Ventilation fans, that's in the event they have to extract smoke in the event of a fire or an incident. Those are throughout the tunnel, and including Saint Laurent. Guideway intrusion detection systems is an enhancement. This is if there's an intrusion into the actual track or at the ends of the tunnel. That's to avoid any conflict, obviously, or trespassing situations. And all these systems are integrated and get fed into the control center. And then the track work in the tunnel, which you'll see, which the Mayor was speaking about in the upcoming event. Now, the other piece that I was talking to you about was the communication-based train control system. This system has been used around the world. Our system is from Thales, and it controls all the train movements, and it's the most complex part of the system. The critical focus or elements on that is about testing and commissioning, because they're very vital to, obviously, the completion and delivery of the system. And this is where, unless this gets finalized and signed off in a certain way, we cannot and will not go into revenue service. It's the system that controls the train. It's really the brain of the entire system, and it's hidden behind the scenes. I'm going to show you some inside photos of how it works. And they work together from systems and train controllers. That's the terminology you'll hear. Zone controllers that control the area of where the train is moving, and then the automatic train supervision. That's the control system that oversees every train movement. 4 steps to that process. So when we get to the testing and commissioning of this, you'll hear me talk about where are we on system integration testing, where are we on acceptance of it, and where are we on the safety case that tests everything that's been delivered and is documented. And that's what the safety certifier looks for, in terms of not just have you done the work, but have you documented it, and can they sign off on it. And then, of course, we move to trial operations. It's the show me part. So on paper it all works, and then out in the field we have to see it live. This is how it works, and if you need to look at it in more detail, you just Google Thales CVTC. Again, used around the world. On the far left, if you look at those 2 pictures, under conventional train operations, you had to have wide gaps between your trains. and you could not control the spacing. That's train movements are all about adequate braking distances and speeds and curvature. With CBTC, when it's fully automated, and these are the best systems in the world, where if you go around the world, you go to anywhere in Shanghai and high volume places and London Underground and so forth. New York City's looking to move to this. You can shorten the distance between the trains, and the system knows exactly the braking distance and the space it can manage. So you can get more through output throughout the system. So you can increase your frequency without having to add trains. And it, as you can imagine, it works very, very well, but you need to test it end to end, and then you get that safety certification on it. So it's state of the art. It's been used before. We're not bleeding edge here. It is leading edge technology, but it's been used around the world, and there are systems and processes in place as to how you certify and sign off on this system. But it controls the speed, the movement of those trains, and they're fully automatic. We do have an operator in the cab. They're an enhancement to the safety protocols and the procedures of those trains. So what makes it work? On the left, that's the onboard module. It's feeding data consistently to the control center, and it's feeding all that information to what are called zone controllers. Those are the buildings that you don't see that are embedded in those stations throughout the system. So you see not just the volume, but the complexity of it. And there's some great work being done, again, all hidden to the public, but this is what really makes the whole thing come together. Assembly of the vehicles, 33 out of 34 vehicles, and soon we'll have the last one on the assembly line. That's an example of the vehicle going through the wash station. There is a wash station as part of the maintenance facility. And then ART, an integral part of the customer experience. This just gives you a sampling of the scale of the ART. This is going down one of the staircases at that Lion. This is at Bayview looking down. That's a very large piece of ART. It's not completed yet. It's got the protection on it. And then I want to touch on operator training and testing. For months we've been training our operators using our simulator. They need to understand the rule books, the procedures, the safety protocols. It is very, very intense. And they spend literally hundreds of hours doing that before they even step foot onto a vehicle. And when you see those vehicle movements out right now, that's generally speaking, that's our trainers in operations. They're running the trains on manual mode, and then once the CBTC can proceed to the multiple train testing mode, we'll then go fully automated with them in the vehicles. So the upcoming works is the landscaping at the East Portal, permanent power to the tracks and the systems in the western alignment, the lanterns that I talked to you about, and the platform signage at all the stations, the ticketing machines and the fare gates. All the base wiring and conduits have been installed for those, and ongoing monitoring of RTG schedule and their continued adherence to November 2nd RSA date. The key activities, like last time, the multiple trains operating in CBTC mode or full automated mode is what we're looking for. We want consistent end-to-end testing on the line, and we want full fleet testing, eventually all 34 trains on the track from Tunney's to Blair Station. That concludes the presentation, Mr. Mayor. Happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you. We'll get the lights brought back up. Just a couple of quick points. I've started a list of people who'd like to speak. The Rideau Street has a lot of construction by the old Elephant and Castle, right at Rideau and the cross-section of Colonel By or Sussex. When is that going to start to be cleared up? Because it seems to have taken a long time. Is that the escalator that they're installing there? It seems like it's a forever project, and they never seem to shrink the site.
Yeah, there's a few things, Mr. Mayor, going on at the west end of that section near the Sussex. So the west entrance is part of that work, so that goes from the Rideau Centre, the corner of the Rideau Centre there down, and that was the escalator Mr. Manconi showed. The other big piece of work that's going on there, probably more impactful right now than the entrance, is the tunnel vent shaft in front of the Hudson's Bay building there, and that's a huge vent shaft for the tunnel down below.
Right.
So that work is well underway. They've punched through that shaft into the tunnel itself, and they've done the concrete lining. So that work will probably continue into sort of midsummer. It'll be a few months yet to complete that work.
So you're confident that is going to be on time for the November start?
Yeah, that work is proceeding on schedule, and to the east end, there's work going on there. A lot of that work right now is for the BNS overbuild at Williams Street, and so that's associated, of course, with this project, not directly related, but associated with it. And again, that work will be going on till midsummer as well.
I think there was, I don't know if Matt Fleury is here, he raised an issue with me with respect to the hoarding. Has he talked to you about that?
Yes, he did, Mr. Mayor. So there's two areas of hoarding of concern. So one of them is right in front of the BNS building, or the east entrance into the Rideau Station. They're coincidental, of course, at that point. And then there's the one more towards Dalhousie. So RTG is using both of those right now as they finish off the station down below. The BNS will need, as the building finishes, they'll need a laydown area for sort of fit up of that and final finishing of that. But so we're working with RTG in order to track their progress, and we'll minimize or eliminate those two hoarding areas as possible.
And Queen Street, I noticed they have the interlocking brick at, I think, at Queen and Kent. It seems to be moving there. When is that street going to be fully operational? Because that's been tough on the people who work and shop along there.
Yeah, again, they've started up on the construction work on Queen now, and a lot of that work relies on RTG finishing vent shafts, because of course you can't really finish those areas while RTG is working. So they're working in a number of different areas coincidentally, and that should again be mid to late summer. It's on schedule as well.
So the issue of the glass, there's lots of glass, which makes it very attractive. The stations are very sharp looking. But, I see far too many bus shelters where people have gone and smashed the glass. Is this glass reinforced to some degree so it's nothing is completely vandal-proof? But have we taken that into account? I don't want to have these beautiful stations open up and then, all sorts of glass smashed because there's a lot of it on the site.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, the glass is designed as, has a structural component to it, recognizing, wind loads, loads from people, and recognizing the size and magnitude of the glass. It is designed for those loads.
So all of the stations, I believe, are generally, they're close to most of the elements, but they're not heated and so on. Have we got assurance that things like the ticket stations and the escalators are going to be operational? Because in very cold weather, I'm thinking of people traipsing in with salt and grit on their boots and it getting into the escalator and the thing clunking out. What kind of protection do we have so that we're not always, dealing with escalators that are stopped because we've got elements of snow and water getting into the system?
Mr. Mayor, we have a couple of things. There's been a lot of wind testing and weather testing done, including on the fare gates. That's actually changed some of the scope of work on the shielding and heaters and things like that over them. But RTG is accountable for all of those. You have a 30-year concession period with them. I'm glad you raised escalators. Those are tricky. Those are the ones to watch. On the elevators, you've done double elevators just about everywhere, so there's redundancy there. But their monthly payment is contingent on them meeting a bunch of performance metrics, including all those elements. And then also on the vandalism part, also just a reminder, there's lots of cameras there also, and we have our special constables that'll be through the stations on a regular basis.
All right, thank you. Councillor Harder?
Thank you. I just have a question about the operators, and I was interested. I think it's the first time you've really showed the in-depth training that they need. How are you vetting the operators? I'm sure a lot of them want to do this exciting new job. And, we know that our operators are excellent at what they do, so that must be tricky. But have you devised a way to test them for this new technology so that obviously you can't train everybody? What does that look like?
Yes, Councillor, they have to apply. They go through a vigorous screening. They also have the simulator that they're tested on. And just because you make it into the course doesn't mean you pass, just like our bus operators. I don't know if you saw the picture of the binder. The first thing they get is a 6-inch binder that they have to literally read and study. There's multiple tests. Not everybody makes it through. Again, like our bus operations. The simulator is also a telling tale. We don't put you out on the vehicle. That's why we invested the money we did on that. They're $10 million vehicles. We don't want someone out there that doesn't know what they're doing. The toughest part of about that job, it's called the rule book. Everything you do, every moment of your day is based on a rule book. And there's some people that just aren't wired that way. It's very prescriptive, what you do, how you do it, the time you have allotted to it. And also some people don't want it because there's an interaction with customers. You're in a cab by yourself.
Yeah.
So it's not for everybody. But as you know, we're shrinking our workforce. And so we're promoting from within, and we're getting the best people applying for it, and there's been a lot of uptake for it.
That's good. And also, just think about the added responsibility. It's a huge responsibility for any of the operators right now for the people part of the job, which is how many are on those buses. But this is that times 6 or 7 or 8, I would think. Yeah. So that would take a certain personality.
Correct.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Harder. Councillor Blaine, please.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. Just following up on the question about the escalators and the elevators, and I appreciate that RTG is responsible for keeping it all up. When our elevator here breaks down at City Hall, it's down for like 12 weeks, and it's because there's a shortage of the technicians that are needed, et cetera. Is RTG going to have that expertise on staff, or are they going to be relying on outsourcing to the pool, the broader pool that's within Ottawa to make those kinds of repairs?
So we don't know all of their contractors that they're bringing on board. I know who's maintaining their vehicles and their guideway and things like that. But the elevators that you've bought for the system are very costly. They're probably the best out in the industry right now. We don't know who they brought on board, but if they don't perform, we don't pay them, and then we can take corrective action through the project agreement. We are meeting. They've just hired their new maintenance director, and Mr. Cripps and I will be speaking to them. And I can assure you that we will continue to remind them of our expectation as outstanding service all the time. But yeah, no, there could be those gaps, and as we all know, there's a shortage of trades people right now, and those things are complicated devices. They're fully electronic. So.
Been getting a lot of feedback. I think it's because of the lengthy winter we had this year, but getting a lot of feedback about how some things will operate with the LRT in the cold weather months. So I'm wondering if perhaps in next month's presentation you could include some information about how the snow is going to get cleared off, the ice on the wire. This is some stuff that we've discussed over the years, but it would be good to, I think, for everyone to have a refresher.
I think that's a great idea. I'll bring some stuff focused on maintenance and winter maintenance in particular.
All right. Councillor Deans, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, Mr. Manconi, last month when you were here, you told us that you had a fair degree of certainty that the construction challenges could be met for revenue service in November. You had less confidence in the system's integration. Just wondered if you could update us on both of those things, your confidence level in both of those areas.
Certainly. Thank you, Councillor. I think people want me to say guaranteed we're going to make November 2nd, and I think those of you that know me, I will never say that because I can't give you that guarantee based on where we are right now. What I will tell you is this. Mr. Cripps and I met with the CEO this week, Monday morning, and we met with her. They've done some organizational adjustments based on where they are with their construction team. There's a new director of construction. He's their most senior person at SNC-Lavalin. And I told them exactly what I was going to be asked today. Where are we on November 2nd? And he assured Mr. Cripps and I that it is their mission to achieve the November 2nd date. So those are words. As you know, I look for the evidence to match the words. And I can tell you that the oversight that is breathing down their back, some of them have shared with me they've never seen the pressure that we're putting on them in terms of before I tell you guaranteed we're going to make November 2nd, I need to see that evidence, and I will not say that until I have that, because I will not just say November 2nd for the hope of November 2nd. So the oversight with the strong support from Mr. Kanellakis, constantly applying pressure to that executive team, saying that we will be over on top of them, watching them not just from a paper exercise, but also field exercise, which we're doing right now. And I also told that new director that I'm not going to wait till September, October if there's issues that indicate we're not going to make it. So they're progressing well on the civil. I will sleep better when the trains are operating in fully automated mode, and then they incrementally add that stress to the system, and we see how the system pans out.
So you still have less confidence in the systems side than the construction side?
I wouldn't characterize it as less confidence. I just haven't seen the evidence to say we're in good shape.
Right.
And once I see that, then I can start to update you accordingly in that. I was very pleased with the train movement through the tunnel. Had I not seen that, we'd be concerned, right? So it's incremental, and we need to see the evidence to indicate they can get to November 2nd.
Okay. I just wanted to also ask about an update on the, I think it was, if memory serves me correctly, about $1.8 million in missed revenue and monthly costs around detours, and we're supposed to be negotiating with RTG about who's going to pay that bill. How's that going?
So we're still in active discussion with them. We have a report going to Transit Commission middle of May, and it's going to, we're booking the amounts to balance off our budget based on everything that Mr. Kanalakis' memo has told you and all of the conditions that we're enforcing with RTG. We've advised them that our expectation is that we're kept whole on all those things, and that's been our position and continues to be our position, and we're continuing to discuss through all those elements with them.
So no agreement yet?
Not at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor G. Councillor Manette.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Chair. The question on elevators is a very good question. If the elevator for some reason did not function, is there accessible ways for people in wheelchairs or walkers or people who cannot take the stairs to get to the train?
So there's double elevators, so there's always a backup. There's escalators, and then there's our staff that would assist them if all those systems fail.
Staff would assist
Absolutely, there every station.
I'm just looking at the worst case scenario sort of thing.
Absolutely, no. You will see both from the camera perspective, and all those systems are through our control.
Yep.
If an elevator goes out, there will be an indicator light on, and we'll be able to mobilize immediately on that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Manette. Councillor Taylor.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. This question is more less to do with the tech and more to do with kind of the marriage of work that's being done with the Ready for Rail campaign. So when we get near the end, when we get near final, I guess, passenger or pre-passenger testing, whatever, is there a period prior to opening for revenue service where you're going to have, I don't know what you want to call them, test groups, focus groups, actual passengers, people who are not intimately familiar with how to navigate the platforms, that haven't been involved in the building of it, to kind of come in. They could be city staff. I'm just, people to come in and use the system. I mean, I often find the challenge with big projects like this is we're all in it, so we all think everything is intuitive. But once you turn it over to people who have never had any experience with it, it might yield a different outcome.
Absolutely. We're doing exactly what you just described. It's a great question. And we are not using OC Transpo staff for it. We'll be there overseeing it. But it's an observational exercise with full loads. We're actually going to, we haven't mapped out all the details, but we'll probably be doing a calling out to city staff. We have 16,000 employees. And we're going to load up the system at a station level, at a vehicle level, and so forth, and then solicit their feedback well in advance of timing, because we always know that it's either signage that's misplaced or things that are not out of order, and we want to see how comfortable they are. So absolutely, we're doing that. That follows a bunch of emergency and mock tests that we have to do for evacuation and fire and things like that.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. See no more question on the item. Receive. Receive. Samir.
Thank you, Councillor El Shantiri. So our next item is item 5, operating and capital budget. We have a presentation by the city treasurer. I know the press will follow this closely because it's good news, and they're always very good at delivering good news. Marianne, don't take it personally. It happens to me all the time. So we have the dynamic duo from the finance department, the treasurer and deputy treasurer, and we have a presentation, and then we also have a number of motions that deal with the operating and capital budget. So this is the Q1 status report, and we have a PowerPoint presentation as well. And Ms. Jasmine, are you doing the presentation, or is... okay.
Thank
All
you,
right,
Mr. Mayor.
there we go. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So yes, we do have good news for Q1. The quarterly reporting and capital status reports are prepared as part of the reporting framework approved by Council. The purpose of this report is to present the first quarter operating and capital results for citywide tax-supported programs and rate-supported programs. Le présent rapport a pour objet de présenter les résultats des activités de fonctionnement et d'immobilisation au premier trimestre des programmes municipaux financés par les taxes et des programmes municipaux financés par les redevances. Forecasts to the end of the year will be provided in the second quarter report. Results for library, public health, police, and transit are not included here, but are presented to their individual boards and commissions.
Can you just push your mic a little closer, please? Thank you.
The citywide tax-supported services ended Q1 with an $8.373 million surplus. Staffing savings mainly driven by unfilled vacancies in the first quarter. Vacancies contributed to the surplus in some areas, but not all. Compensation is 25% spent compared to the annual budget. So overall, we are on track at the 25%. It's actually a little bit below where we typically are at Q1. Winter operations savings due to milder weather conditions in the first half of 2018 winter season. The second half will determine the final results, but so far winter operations are under budget. This budget was increased over the past several years to better match the averages. Services sociaux et communautaires, une recette ponctuelle supplémentaire de 3,25 millions de dollars liée au SAGA. Community and social services, additional $3.25 million. This is one-time revenue related to the SAMS implementation back in 2014. There was a reconciliation that was completed in 2017 to recover the increase in operating costs to the city. There had been amounts accrued up to that point, so the total amount was around $9.4 million, and that 3.25 represented the final portion of what needed to be reconciled and recovered from the city. So this is one-time revenue, and there will be recommendations at the end of this presentation for use of those funds. Non-departmental increased revenues related to penalties, interest, investment income, and provincial events fees, and the overall lower spending in first quarter in various expenditure accounts across departmental areas. In some cases, it's due to reduced costs, but it could also be due to delayed spending that could occur in the next quarters. So this slide shows you a summary. As you notice, on the right-hand column, all of the numbers are positive, so every single service area had a surplus. The key areas, as I mentioned, public works and environmental services, I'll start the community and social services, 3.25. That was also offset by a deficit in shelter costs increasing and long-term care sick leave. So the 3.25 is reduced slightly because of costs in other areas. Public works and environmental services, the $963,000 surplus, primarily due to winter, $987,000 under budget. And then, as I mentioned, the other large number here is under non-departmental, primarily from investment incomes and fees. It's for a total of surplus of $8.373. So in terms of the rate program, operations ended Q1 with a $1.248 million deficit.
La consommation d'eau est légèrement plus faible à 98,8% de la consommation prévue au calendrier, mais est compensée par des dépenses réduites. Water consumption is slightly below at 98.8% of the calendarized budget consumption, offset by reduced expenditures due to lower consumption. There was a deficit, though, in the wastewater services, primarily due to claim settlements for the 2009 flooding and for backup incidents. There was $1.7 million in claims, but there was $800,000 that was accrued in previous years. So the overall deficit in the rate program was 1.248. And finally, the recommendations to receive the Q1 results. But in terms of the 3.25, establish a capital project for $2.25 million to fund initiatives to advance the 10-year housing and homelessness plan funded by one-time provincial revenue as detailed in the report. These are recommendations to committee. And establish a capital project for $1 million to fund equipment replacement and technology upgrades for long-term care services and funded by one-time provincial revenue as detailed in the report. As was approved recently by Community and Protective Services Committee, the $1 million may also be used, could also be used for, as needed, to augment the $800,000 to hire the 35 additional personnel support workers in 2018. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So we'll introduce the motions at this time and then open it up for discussion. So I have a motion, don't know if this is on the screen, I'll just read it out. Whereas CPS has recommended the Council add 35 additional personal support workers in long-term care services in 2018 and provide $800,000 funding from one-time and unforeseen account to accommodate the part-year impact of the new positions. Whereas staff have advised that if they're able to hire these positions sooner, the part-year impact may be more, and whereas Recommendation 3 recommends the establishment of a capital project for $1.0 million to fund equipment replacement and technology upgrades for long-term care services funded by one-time provincial revenue, and this would fund this fund would provide the general manager of Community and Social Services with the flexibility to bring the personal support workers on sooner than anticipated. Therefore, be it resolved that Recommendation 3 be amended to add the following, quote, and delegate the authority to the General Manager of Community and Social Services to use these project funds as needed to augment the $800,000 provided to hire 35 additional personal support workers in 2018, and if needed, subject to the approval of the FTEs and related funding by Council. The next motion, Councillor Harder, with respect to the Barrhaven food cupboard, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the beginning, I didn't expect this to be before FEDCO and part of the budget because I was looking to invest cash in lieu of parkland money that I invest annually in the Walter Baker. I've done a number of things over the past years, and Walter Baker is one of our largest sports facilities, and it's approaching 40 years old. And so all of the, whether it's a new mat and the hockey mat and benches, all kinds of stuff. I've got an order in right now for about $35,000 for accessibility in those arenas that are so steep that I know when I go to hockey games, I'm scared to death, and I know many people around me are too. So we're fixing that. So in this case, and Mr. Chenier knows this well, it's been I think it was the year 2000, City of Nepean expanded the Ruthie Dickinson branch out over what used to be the back door. And it created a dead space of 2,000 square feet. So for 19 years, I've been trying to find a use for it with Mr. Chenier and saying, come on, surely we can use this. The Barrhaven Food Cupboard needs a home. They've very much outgrown their home. They're going to invest just the very basics to retrofit this so we can add HVAC, change the outside door and the windows, beef up the electrical and add some water is $225,000. So they have $125,000, and I have $100,000 that I was going to be putting in, as I did with the sports field at the Nepean Rec last year when Councillor Egli and I did that. So the change was the staff said, well, it's not going to be for a recreation space, and so therefore that's why this is here. So I will actually be paying with my cash in lieu for something at the PN Sportsplex, which is already going to be done, and that money will be used for this.
Councillor Aguilar is in concurrence with that. Right. Okay, so that's the second one. The third one is the Richcraft Recreation Complex. Councillor El Shantiry is going to move it on behalf of Councillor Wilkinson, and staff are supportive.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much. This is about the construction of the Richcraft Recreation Complex in Canada. It was completed in 2013 at the cost of $42.38 million. So without reading the whole report, Mr. Mayor, or the motion, obviously there is therefore be it resolved that Council approve the removal of the Community Endowment Fund requirement from the financing plan for the facility, as well as the limitations on fundraising costs. There be a further resolve that the Community Fund current held in trust be made available to invest in priority capital enhancement for the site, including an outdoor fitness park, beach volleyball pitch, and sponsor recognition board. And there be a further resolve that the obligation under the original Council approved funding program agreement with the Canada North Recreation Centre, Inc. are now considered fulfilled. And that's prepared by staff, Mr. Mayor, and on behalf of my colleague, Councillor.
Okay, so we'll get to that in a moment. And the final one is by me. Whereas the Innovation Centre of Bayview Yards opened in December 2016 to foster innovation and entrepreneurship, whereas more than 60 startups have been incubated at Bayview Yards since its opening. Won't go over every whereas, but whereas the Grocer, GROWCER, and Invest Ottawa client at Bayview has developed a state-of-the-art farming system that combines hydroponic technology with precision climate controls inside a sea container to enable northern and rural communities to grow affordable food in a climate year-round. Whereas the Grocer, in partnership with Invest Ottawa and FedDevNor, will install a growing system at Bayview Yards for the purpose of demonstrating its technology and providing secure and year-round source of produce to Just Foods Community Food Hub, and to ensure food security for local organizations like Market Mobile, whereas this system will enable entrepreneurs to test and validate new agri-tech innovations on-site at Bayview. Therefore, be resolved that FEDCO recommend that Council approve the provision of $45,000 in funding from one-time and unforeseen account to Invest Ottawa to cover the cost of preparing the site and installing the growing system as described in the motion. So, questions, comments? Jan, your mic on. Do you want to? Jan Harder? No. Councillor Deans?
Yeah, just one question about the one-time and unforeseen account, because there are a number of motions here today taking some funds from it. I think they're really good motions, but just wondered about how much money is actually left in that account.
There was $1.2 million in there, and CPS used $800,000 yesterday, so there's $400,000. So this is $45,000 out of $400,000. Excuse me.
Other questions? So we'll go in the motions as I receive them. The first one is by myself with respect to the flexibility for the general manager with respect to the long-term care, additional 35 personal support workers. Carried. I think your mic's on, Diane. Next is Councillor Harder with respect to the transfer of funds for the Barrhaven food cupboard. Carried. Next is the Richcraft Recreation Complex. Marianne, did you want to say anything? This basically, the community did a very good job of fundraising, and I know I bought my time capsule tube there, and it looks great. Yeah. So
just very briefly, Mr. Mayor, I think the organization that I set up, we incorporated now that we've raised over $1 million for the facility. We are still operational, but we are being hindered by the agreement we had because it limits how much money we can spend to raise money, and you need to you spend some to raise money, as you know. We've spent very little on that. We still run Canada Race Day, we run a Junior Ranger program, and we're now funding for the volleyball courts there. So it's a very small group of 5 of us, but it's incredible what we are able to do with it by leveraging this number of people. And I'd encourage others to look into it. The new policy you just approved earlier on about fundraising for dissection actually incorporates a lot of the things that we did at the time. And I think having the policy, I was very glad to see that. It makes it easier for a group to know more or less how to go about doing things. But this is just actually to We were supposed to originally raise more money for the operation of the pool, which we've not able to do, but the pool is actually making money on its operation, so the staff have said they don't need it, and it just clears the deck on this one. Thank you.
Well, I can attest that anytime I'm at that center, which is beautiful, it's packed with parents and kids taking lessons, and it's great. So carried on that motion. Then the final motion is by myself with respect to the Innovation Center. The Prime Minister actually went in and visited this site as well. It's really quite impressive. It's going to help local communities with food security. Motion? Carried. On the report as amended? Carried. The next item that was taken from the information previously distributed, economic impact, Hard Rock Cafe. Councillor Deans had a question.
I actually have several questions, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Smith will be here to answer this question.
The economic, the motion that created this report was one that you moved, Mr. Mayor, and it directs staff to begin an analysis of potential economic benefits and impacts and potential social impacts. And so when I read the report, it was done by Shore Tanner and Associates, who are real estate appraisers and consultants. Just wondering if that makes sense to have real estate appraisers, the ones that are doing an economic and social impact analysis.
So, Mr. Mayor, the decision to retain Shore and Tanner was Hard Rock Casino's decision, and they brought them on board to undertake the economic impact analysis. They do have some work that they do in that field, but we always indicated that once that work is completed by Hard Rock, that we would go out and get it peer reviewed. So we're in the process of doing that right now in terms of the peer reviewer. We haven't received the final report as of yet, but as we indicate in the IPD, once that's received, we will report back in a memo to committee, to Mayor and members of Council.
So presumably that'll be before the 9th of May when Council has to make the decision?
We will follow up with KPMG and just confirm on the timing for them to get something back to us. If we don't get the full report, the intent is to at least have a discussion with them to understand sort of what some of the highlights are of the peer review that they've undertaken. So if we can share that with Council when we go to Council on the rezoning, then we can do that, yes.
Because, you know, the way I read this motion, staff was directed to do this. What we have received to date is, I guess, was just retained by the proponent. And I got to tell you, it's an interesting piece of work that kind of defies logic in my mind in some cases. For example, on page 34, it says, information regarding Casino Lac Leamy revenues, especially by customer origin, are not available. However, we have frequently heard that Ottawans spend at least $62 million annually at Casino Lac Leamy. We realize that the above points are not based on any factual or official information, so I just don't know what we're supposed to do with that. I mean, they seem to be saying that we're going to repatriate $62 million, but it's not fact-based at all. So what are we supposed to do with this?
So again, Mr. Mayor, this is an update in terms of us responding to that particular direction. As I indicated, we don't have the peer review. That's one of the items that I anticipate would be identified by the peer reviewer as requiring some additional work. There is information that can be obtained from OLG, as I understand, in terms of the dollars. So clearly, there are areas that we're going to be looking for some greater clarity to be provided. If we can get that information, like I said before, Council will do that, but I anticipate there's a good likelihood that we'll get the peer reviewer comments, and there may then be a need to go back to Shore Tanner and have them respond back to what those comments might be and fill out sort of where the gaps in their economic impact statement would be.
And have you done any work on the social impact statement?
The social impact piece, that was something that was dealt with through public health. I think the two items were actually separated, the economic and the social. And the social piece, public health, I understand, had a presentation from OLG a couple of weeks ago.
Okay. I'm just still trying to understand what benefit this economic impact statement that's being peer reviewed by KPMG will be to us if we've already made the decision on the 9th of May. 9th of May. The decision goes to Council on May 9th.
Again,
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. Like, I just want clarification on something. The application's coming forward to your committee, I think, Councillor, on Thursday is for a hotel. So it's a planning application. And I'm wondering why, in fact, the economic development from a hotel, I mean, we is critical to us making a decision because, I mean, is it pertaining to what we're talking about today? I just am not sure. I mean, we have 5 new hotels going out in Canada, and I don't think that we had discussion about the economic development to Canada.
Okay.
So I'm kind of wondering
They
why
were
you're holding your hat on.
directed to do an economic impact analysis. It's on the agenda today in the form of an IPD. I, as a member of council, have every right to ask questions about the contents.
Sure, but I don't see the tie-in between the 10th, between the 9th and this report.
Well, the 9th is really the day we're making the decision on the future of the casino. So I just also wanted to ask about harness racing, because anyone that's been around for a while will recall that the reason we ended up with RCR as the site was to maintain harness racing. But when I read this report, it seems to indicate that there will be a reduction in harness racing at RCR from 90 days to 70. Is that correct? Is there a planned reduction in harness racing?
If the report indicates that, again, the operations at RCR has been transferred over to Hard Rock Ottawa, and it's up to them to determine sort of how they're going to be running the operations. If they're looking at doing a slight reduction in the harness racing will continue at the Albion Road site, but in terms of the frequency and how often that will occur, there may be some adjustments that might be made to that by Hard Rock. But it's entirely within their purview in terms of taking over the operations of the facility as overall.
Okay. I'm just wondering if anyone has factored in the higher cost for paratranspo users. Right now, as I understand it, it'll be about $9 to go to RCR versus $3 to go to Gatineau. Is that something that has been considered by this report or will be considered by the peer review?
An economic impact assessment wouldn't necessarily get into that level of operational. It's looking more at what are the overarching economic benefits, both immediate short-term related to construction activity, and then the longer term in terms of what does this bring to the Ottawa economy.
Okay. And the consultant's report says that the average current salary at RCR for employees is around $30,800, but is anticipated to go to $40,000 after the expansion. Do you know why there's a 25% projected increase in salaries?
Again, that's well within Hard Rock's operations, and my understanding there was an averaging that was undertaken in the report that was completed, but in terms of those details, that's really with them. That's within their purview.
Okay, those are all my questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Est-ce qu'il y a des autres questions? Okay. Notice of motion for consideration of subsequent meetings. Avis de motion pour examen lors d'une réunion subséquente. Any written inquiries? Other business? Adjournment. Motion to adjourn? Carried. Next meeting is the 5th of June. La prochaine réunion, c'est le 5 juin. Meeting adjourned. Thank you. Merci. Thank you very much. There you go. All my junk. Whoops.